So we had a question by somebody here during the break about a little bit of confusion between data references and XREFs. And so I want to make this 100% clear. We brought in this existing grade surface through the data shortcuts menu. And this is for a number of reasons. We use data references, data shortcuts, and XREFs for very much the same reasons, but they're two different data sources that are used for two different reasons. So to reiterate and to make hopefully 100% clear, the data shortcuts menu can only be used for various types of civil objects: surfaces, alignments, pipe networks, and view frame groups. So those can be data shortcutted into any drawing after they're saved and to the proper location and then created through the data shortcuts menu. So we always bring in all of our surfaces through data shortcuts and not through XREFs. Now the XREF manager is its own thing, and through the XREF manager we can bring in drawings, images, design review documents, DWFs, microstation files, DGNs, PDFs, point clouds, and other types of objects through the XREF menu. And the reason we use these two different types of data sources are very similar in terms of the reasoning. What we want is that for design data that's used as a common design data throughout the entire project, in other words, through most of the drawings of the project, we want it to be exactly the same on every single sheet. So when I make changes, which we're about to do, to this underlying 2D line work drawing, I want those changes to be able to be reflected in every single drawing in the drawing set that it's needed. If, for instance, I had all of this as live line work within the drawing, in other words, it wasn't an XREF and this was all live polylines and leaders and text, there's a chance that someone could inadvertently make a change to that drawing that would not then be reflected in a future drawing. So it's important that we use XREFs for just about every type of line work in a drawing. If it shows up, and my philosophy is, if any piece of line work or hatch or text or even a legend, shows up on more than one drawing, it should certainly be an XREF. If something, for instance, exists on only one drawing, you can make the argument that it doesn't necessarily have to be an XREF, but we tend to lean on XREFs and data shortcuts a lot because it allows us to, if I were, for instance, to go in and make changes to this existing grade surface based on additional data, it would be reflected and updated it in that drawing. It would then be reflected in every drawing that the surface is referenced into. But what we found out when we looked at the plot preview is that there's some certain color choices that are going on in this XREF that we want to change. Now, this is going to lead into a lot of different decisions when it comes to colors and layers within that host drawing. And what we're going to notice when we make these changes in the host drawing is that they're not necessarily going to be reflected into this drawing. And that is by design, at least by how Civil 3D works at its core, or actually AutoCAD in general, because XREFs are an AutoCAD, a general AutoCAD feature, not just for Civil 3D. So what we'll do here is we'll activate our viewport by double-clicking it. We've got a locked viewport so we can zoom in and out without messing up our scale. So I'm going to select the underlying line work here and then right-click and ask it to open that XREF. There's another option for editing the XREF in place, which is perfectly valid for some reasons, but we want to actually go in and make changes to that original XREF drawing. Again, it was called 2D line work existing or 2D LW existing. So we know that this is showing up as red, both the line and the text, and that's based on the color that's assigned in the properties. And it's really, we would want this to show up, we would want this to be set to by layer and not to color 10. And we'll get into a little bit more of what's going on with colors and plotting in just a minute. But the first step here is I would ask it to select similar. I'm going to grab all of that information and put it on by layer. Okay, we could have done this earlier when we first opened up this XREF, or when we first developed this XREF, but I wanted to show you how this works in the real world when it comes to seeing these changes or seeing how these things look from a surveyor and the changes that are necessary to make it. So again, when I selected similar there, I grabbed a lot more things than I wanted to. So I just want to be sure that we're grabbing these staked points that the surveyor grabbed. And make sure, see, apparently these are on different layers because every single one of these that we selected says we have 21 in total. We inadvertently grabbed some points. So to avoid that, I'm actually going to do a quick select command and choose points, and I want to use select all to grab all of the points in the drawing. All right, these were inadvertently grabbed when we were copying over the line work. And in fact, I really don't want them in this drawing. The points are nice for the surveyor, but they're not necessarily critical for the work that we're doing. So I'm actually going to delete those to get rid of them right now. We're going to delete these points out. They still exist in the survey should we ever need to go back and get them. And then I'm going to redo my selection set to grab, again, shift select if you grab something inadvertently, to grab these X's that represent the point locations. Now that I've got all of these selected, I'm going to change them to bilayer as well. And the next thing is to grab the text for this wetlands boundary, what I believe is a wetlands boundary, and change it to bilayer. Now I'm going to leave this drawing open, but I am going to save it. And once I've saved it, the drawing that it's referenced into will note that it's been changed and been saved and ask me to reload it. When this pop-up comes up, I'll click on it to reload that existing XREF. And then we're going to look at how these bilayer changes, changing everything to bilayer, how it affected our current drawing. I'll go back into a plot preview and see that the color choice that they used, which was a bilayer choice, is giving us sort of a dark gray line and text to represent that wetlands boundary. You can see it's similar but not exact to our major contour interval here. It has a similar thickness to the line, but it's a darker gray. But we notice that we still have some text and color up here when it comes to pointing out this bolt in the concrete. It's giving me nice northings, eastings, and elevations. This is text that we'll actually end up probably recreating in our eventual XREF. But for now, I just want it to not show up in red, and so I'll go back into the 2D line work existing and investigate these objects to see that they're also set to a particular layer, but not set to bilayer. So I will change that to bilayer here and here. And save this drawing once more. Once we go back into our final design drawing, I'll reload it and then check our plot preview again. Now, there would be further refining of this 2D line work drawing in terms of the text and the multi-leaders and what we show. You know, if we're doing a lot of design work in this area, we may not want to show all of the surveyor's text for water meters and 4-inch capped PVCs, the top of concrete. We may not need to show all of that text in our final drawings. It's important to have it, but we may not want to show it at all in our drawings. For now, I'm going to leave it all on there because this is the intent of this is to show it to a project manager to sort of show them what we got from the surveyor and how it looks now after we've spent a little bit of time refining the look of it. So this is looking pretty good for now, and I'm going to leave everything alone. At some point, I may come back into this drawing and decide that I want to turn all of the text off and I would just come in and grab all of the text that I could find and turn it all to the def points layer so that it would disappear from the drawing. And also make sure that it's set to by layer as well. I'll just make those few changes to these texts and leaders here just to show you how switching information to the def points layer affects your final drawing and the print output. We'll leave the underlying data for the marked locations, but we're just taking some of this text and turning it off by putting it on the def points layer to a non-plot layer and setting it to by layer. I'll save it once more and then we'll close it. And then reload it here. So we see the color of this information changed, and then if we look back at the plot preview, we'll see that that information is no longer there. It seems I've missed one of the leader pointers, but that's okay. You know, as I said, this is an iterative process. We can go back into there and make changes the more we want. The great thing about turning it to the def points layer is that the data is still there for us to see. We know that these are water meters by leaving those text and leader objects inside the drawing, but it no longer prints. And just to show you one more thing, if that was really bugging me, and it sort of is, I can go back in here to edit XREF in place without opening that drawing. It opens it within this window, and I could take all of that line work and make sure that it's on the def points layer and by layer. And then I would save it here, very similar to how blocks are edited and saved in place, and that change is reflected immediately. The last couple things that I want to do to this before I would submit anything to my project manager is I want to add contour labels and a scale bar. This is important because it can give it gives the reviewer information about what view scale that you're using and obviously the elevations along the surveyed conditions. So we have what we know to be a 1 inch equals 20 foot scale set to this viewport. We've already rotated our north arrow to match, but I'm going to insert a scale bar through the insert menu, which is I enter, and then I'm going to scroll down and look for our SE scale bar dynamic block. I'm going to insert that using the defaults. In this case, specify on screen and a uniform scale and a 0 rotation. I'll insert that just below the view here, and then I'll select the object. You'll notice that it put it on my current layer, which was the def points layer. I'm going to type in C on the layer list so that I can put it on the C anno layer, which is an annotative layer. It's where we make annotations and things like that. So, and then I'll make sure that this is set to the proper view scale as the viewport. 1 inch equals 20 feet. Okay? Now, we're going to jump into the model space again through the active viewport and add labels that represents the contour elevations to this surface. To do that, I'm going to select the surface itself and then go up here to the left of the context ribbon. And what you'll notice when you select things that are able to be labeled in Civil 3D, you'll notice that almost always the Add Labels commands box is right up here on the far left. So I'm going to add labels and then choose, in this case, I'm going to choose Contour Single. And I'm going to select a major contour to place it on. It gives us the elevation of that contour in a piece of text, and it is style based like most things in Civil 3D. And if we look at the styles and the settings for this contour label, we see that it's set, let's move this over a little bit, so that it's set to display major contour labels as true, and that style is existing major labels. It's set to display minor contour labels as true, and that style is set to existing minor labels. What I can do with that single contour label, we see when we select it, there's actually a line associated with it that's hidden that we don't actually see. That's also derived by this particular style within the template, and it's controlled right here from display contour label line, and that is set to false, so that when you don't have this selected, you cannot see that underpinning line. Now, if I drag the endpoint of this line across the surface, we can see that it's added contour labels for every single contour that it crossed. If I were to select one of that group again and turn the display minor contour labels to false, we'll see that those minor contour labels disappear. We'll drag this further along and look at how it looks across the page. And what we're looking for here, guys, is readability and legibility. In other words, sometimes when at different scales and depending on the contour interval and depending on how this looks, this text could run into each other and not look very good. And so we want to be careful about that, make sure that everything's legible. In this case, it looks pretty darn good. There's none of these contour labels are overwriting each other or sitting on top of each other or sitting too close that you can't see them. So I'm going to leave them exactly as is. If for any reason that they weren't legible, I may decide to turn off the minor labels and just show the major contours. But it looks so good with them on, I'm going to leave everything on. Now, so we have some basic contour intervals displayed. I want to just make a copy of this contour label line to the other side of the site. I'm going to grab a point on a existing contour and move the entire contour label group over here and see how that now looks. Not too bad. Maybe we want to grab a few more contours up there. And we can see that these are rotating to be in alignment with the contour, and that looks okay, that looks okay. Everything's looking pretty good here. It's not doing any flipping or anything. So the way these labels are set is that they're set to be plan readable, which means if the angle of that contour changes in such a way, you could get some contour flipping. This is what I'm talking about here, contour label flipping, where after it reaches about 110 degrees in rotation, it decides to flip the contour label from one direction to the next. This is a good example where we've got one where the top of the text is pointing to the west and one where the top of the text is pointing to the east. We'd like to avoid that if possible and try to keep everything as clean as possible. And so we could always go back in and add additional contour label groups to label individual contours in a way that looks very nice. So we'll click on that surface again, go back to add labels, contour single, and I'll drop an individual contour label here and here and here, and then those can be refined in terms of location. Not too bad. And we'll copy that one over here. So we've got a nicely created sort of existing site for the project manager to take a look at. From here, I'm going to go back and right click on my layout 1 name. Maybe I want to change this name to existing. I double click on layout 1 and I can change that pretty quickly to existing. And I'll right click and go to plot. And then again, this preview button is a duplicate of this command up here, which is plot preview. But I always want to look at this one more time in terms of the colors that are being used and how it translates to black and white and grayscale, just to make sure that it's looking the way I want to before I actually plot. You know, I'm noticing here that we don't have a title or a drawing number or a sheet number. You know, there's some information we filled into the title block XREF, but we're actually missing some data over here that would be pertinent to our future needs. So before I print, I'm just going to recognize that I don't have that done yet, and I'm going to go try and grab it from somewhere. So I'll cancel that plot command, and since we haven't saved it in a while, I'll go ahead and save. And then I'm going to go grab that text information from another drawing. So if we remember, I had a centralized location on our K drive for a library of title blocks under General Title Blocks. And this is what we opened and saved over to the project folder. I'm going to open this other 22 by 34 underscore text drawing so that I can grab the text information that's needed within that title block. Now, what we'll notice here, guys, This is building onto what's going to be our next lesson, which is the creation of a sheet set. And what we'll notice here is that these pieces of mText objects actually have gray fields behind them. We can read the text pretty easily, but we can see that there's something else going on with these objects. For instance, we have in this text block at the bottom, we have one of XX, where the of is not highlighted with that field. I'll explain all of that in just a minute. I just wanted to point it out. So I'll grab all of this text, and I have this nice little white line that I've created in the past to use to grab from. And I'm going to right click and hit clipboard. Now, instead of clipboard copy, which is what we've mostly been doing, is clipboard copy and then eventually paste to original coordinates, I'm actually going to go to clipboard and use an option here called copy with base point, and then select this as my reference point for copying these objects. When we get back over to our existing paper space, I'll right click again, clipboard, and I'm not choosing paste to original coordinates, I'm just using paste. But because we used copy with base point, it's giving us a base point. It's allowing me to insert those objects from the clipboard at a common point. And I can see here pretty quickly that this should be my common point. The white line that was in the model space of the other drawing is now represented by this red line on the very outside of our paper space, so that we can place these exactly as is. And we can see that these fields came with the drawing, and that's great. That's exactly what we want. So before we actually hit print on this puppy, we're going to go in and create a sheet set and show you all how sheet sets can be created pretty darn quickly and easily, and hopefully I can convince you all to use them for most of your projects. For a lot of you, you're going to have sheet sets already created for existing or ongoing projects, but if you ever need to create one on your own, you shouldn't be daunted. It's actually really, really easy, and it's going to tie into how these fields work through our sheet set. So again, I'll make sure that this drawing is saved, and then I'm going to open up something known as the Sheet Set Manager. I'll go and minimize these for a moment to save on screen real estate, and then go to my Home tab, open up palettes, and what we're looking for is this rolled icon of paper that says Sheet Set Manager. I also want to point out at the bottom of every single command that you have in AutoCAD, if you hover over the command or hover over the toolbar, you'll see at the bottom it gives you it gives you when you hover over the icon, it gives you some information about that command. And at the bottom of every one, it says press F1 for more help. If you're to do that on any command, it'll take you to that online help page for that command. So the same thing with Sheet Set Manager. If you wanted to read up more information, you could simply type F1 while hovering over it and find out a lot more information about sheet sets and sheet set managers that you would ever want to know. So we're going to go and click on that to open up our sheet set palette and close out of the F1 dialog. And our sheet set manager is blank at this point. There's, of course, a set of recent sheet set files in here that we could access, but this is a new project, and so we actually want to create a new sheet set. So when we do this, we're going to click on New Sheet Set, and because I've taken the time to develop a sheet set template, I'm going to use this first option of an example sheet set, and we'll see why in just a moment. Click Next, and it asks me to select a sheet set to use as an example. This is the SE sheet set template that's saved in our template folder on the support file, on the support folder. We'll click Next, and we're going to go and give this a name. Before I name this, I want to be 100% certain of my project name. We don't want to assign a name to the sheet set that may later have to be overridden, because that can actually be quite difficult in the database within Civil 3D to overwrite that name. When it comes right down to it, our sheet set for most big projects is the go-to for all of our most current and up-to-date design drawings. So for that reason, we want the sheet set to have one name, to have one sheet set for the entire project, and to make sure that that name is set properly. We can see here that I have a project name associated, a project number and name associated with this folder, and so we're going to use this exact wording and just take out the underscores. So go back into CAD and paste that name in, and make sure that it looks good. Tonasca River intake dredging. And I want to be very careful about where this DST file is saved. And I certainly don't want it saved on my C drive. So I want to go in and put that into the project folder. Just so you all know, guys, this is work that I actually had to be doing this week. And by showing you all how to do this, I'm actually able to be a little bit half billable at this time. So that's why we're doing this Tonasca River project. All right, so we're saving the DST file in 08 CAD sheet set. This is the only file that should ever live in this folder is the DST file that creates the sheet set. So we'll make sure that that's ready. And then the next thing we're going to do before we hit next is click on sheet set properties. Now all those fields that we see over here on the right hand side of our title block are actually driven from the sheet set data. All right, so we have the sheet set name, its location. We could change the description here because that's a description that's carried over from the template. We could fill this out with project number and project name, and then our checked by, designed by, and drawn by initials. I'll go ahead and fill out my information here. Designed by, I don't know Ben's middle initial.
L.
L. Thank you. We'll put designed by Benjamin L. Bradley, and checked by, I'm pretty sure this is going to be checked by JP. But I don't remember his middle initial either. R maybe?
I don't have
M. M. Thank you. All right, so we'll go ahead and fill out some information here. We're going to leave a good bit of the rest of this information blank, and we can come back and fill that in at a later date. And just so you know, all these custom properties can be edited through a separate menu here where we set whether it's a sheet custom property or a sheet set custom property. More on that later. I'm not going to edit these at this point. I'm going to hit OK and then next. This is a summary page where it gives us information about everything that we've just set, and I'll hit finish. So now we have a blank DST file, a blank sheet set file to then now start importing drawings. Since we already have this drawing created, I just want to make sure it's been saved, and then we can import it into the sheet set. So from here, I'm going to choose the option to import layout as sheet, and then browse to this drawing. Here we are. When we bring this up, it will bring up a list of every single layout in this drawing. If there were multiple layouts, I would have the option to choose to select or deselect the layouts that I want to be included in the sheet set. And I'll leave this option on there for prefix sheet titles with file name. That's fine. I'll click import checked. And now when we go back over to our sheet set, we see that we have a new sheet within that sheet set called existing. This name is based on the drawing name, existing.dwg, and the layout name, existing. That's why this is there. What we're going to want to do pretty immediately is right-click on this drawing name. I also want to point out that there's a lock symbol on this drawing because I currently have it open. One great thing about having a sheet set in a multi-user environment is that you can tell right away who's got what drawings open, and if you need to make edits, often you can hover over the drawing and it'll tell you right here, locked for edit by A. Austin, and it gives my computer name and a lot of other information about the drawing in terms of who the last person to edit it was and what some of the custom properties for that drawing are. But I'm going to right click on this one and say rename and renumber. We're going to call this drawing number is C 01, and we're going to change the sheet title to existing conditions. There's some options under here to rename the layout with the sheet title and the prefix with number. You know, I tend to not like to prefix with sheet number because those often change as you're going through the project. Of course, you could update it here. There's also if you don't currently have the drawing open, that's why these two options are grayed out, is because I currently have the drawing open. But this rename and renumber dialog will actually allow you to change the drawing name within Windows Explorer on our server if it's not open, if you have either one of these two options selected on the right-hand side. But now that I've given it a drawing number and a drawing title, I can click OK, and we'll see that that is reflected immediately in the list of drawings for Tonasca River intake dredging. What we'll also notice is that nothing has quite happened here yet. This still says existing conditions profiles, and this still says A-2. All right, and we'll also look up here and see that our checked by, designed by, and drawn by initials haven't necessarily been updated. That's only because the data has just been added to this drawing. All we would need to do to get that to be reflected in our fields is either save the drawing once more or regenerate it. So I'll choose to regen through the regen command. And what we should see here is that our existing conditions drawing title has been updated. I see that it's not quite centered, so I may just sort of tweak the location of this to get it perfectly centered. And that our drawing number has been updated as well. Now, under sheet X of XXX, those fields have not been updated because we have not set the properties within the sheet set manager. And so if we were to go into this drawing title, and instead of going to rename and renumber, we now go to properties. This is where custom properties are edited and added. We can go to the properties of this sheet. Again, it says sheet properties. This is where the check by, design by, drawn by can be edited for individual sheets. And then here we have a sheet custom property that's called sheet number. And I'm going to call this sheet number 01. And click OK. Now let's see what happens when we regen. The 01 is now added to that sheet. And if we were to go and right click on the sheet set name itself, we can edit the custom properties for it, including the total sheets. That's where the XXX is being derived from. And I anticipate this is going to have about 5 sheets. So we'll put in that number, hit OK, and then regen again. And so now we have C01, which is sheet 01 of 5, and we have our existing conditions as our drawing name. So how all of this works, guys, is by a AutoCAD entity known as fields. And so the fields are being driven by the sheet set, and if you want to create your own fields or your own text objects that have fields in them, it's actually really, really easy. And to demonstrate that, I'm going to first insert a view callout from our insert menu. We have this dynamic block called SE View Callout. I'll insert that right up here. I'll make sure that it's on the proper layer. In this case, Cyano. And then I'm going to click into this block so that I can edit its attributes. We have 3 different attributes within this block. There's a view scale that shows up at the bottom of the block where it says scale 1 to 1. For this case, I already have a scale bar, so I'm going to just put a space in that location to make it disappear. I'll leave this as view number 1, but under the view title, I'm going to want to insert a field. So I'm going to highlight this view title text and right click and then go to the option to insert field. We get this dialog box that comes up with fields, and it's great. This drop down is really important. What we're actually going to do is use the sheet set option, which limits this list here to the available field names based on sheet set, the category of sheet sets. One thing to note here is that if you wanted to, you can actually look at your current sheet set and change your current sheet set by clicking on this option here and then expanding this. This will have a list of every single sheet that's in that sheet set, every drawing, every layout that's in that sheet set, and give you the option to link to different drawings within it. Right now we only have one. So right now I'm going to choose the option for current sheet name, if I can find it. Current sheet title, and choose uppercase as the format, and then it's giving me a preview of what that's going to say right there, and then click OK, and OK. We see that that now has that gray background like all fields, and then I'll just expand this line so that it goes out just past the words, and then recenter my view scale. Shift right click to select the midpoint, and I want it to snap to right there. So now let's take a quick look at what we're providing to the project manager. All right, so it's looking like the drawing itself is looking good. There may be some future edits in terms of what text we show and don't show from the surveyor and how certain colors may look. We may come back in and decide that these wells are a little bit too bold for what we need and change those colors. But for right now, this is looking pretty good. We've got a sheet title, we've got a drawing number, we've got a scale bar and a north arrow. We've got all the elements of a decent looking drawing. So we'll go ahead and generate a PDF for our project manager. So back to data management. How do we save data that we're sending out to somebody to look at? So we'll open up the project folder, SC Products, CAD, and Archives. In my mind, everything that leaves your desk goes into Archives as sent. Every PDF, every DWF, every calculation, every spreadsheet, everything that leaves your desk should be, and especially if it's related to CAD, should be saved into Archives as sent. I'll create a new folder in here for today's date. And I'll just, since we're only providing one drawing here, I'll give it the name of that drawing. So today's date, existing conditions. I'll truncate this eventual PDF name to just be existing conditions.pdf and hit save. And it's set to automatically open that PDF so we can review it. And honestly, it looks exactly as the CAD preview showed us it would. So now we have something we can email off or provide a link to in an email to the project manager so they can review it and tell us where they would like to go further with this drawing. Okay, we're done with this. We're going to go ahead and close it and save it. And I'm going to open it up for any questions that there may be about what we've done so far. Is everybody doing okay on the line? Do we have any questions?
I have one.
Yes, Court.
I mean, we may not be to this yet, but leaders
Multi-leaders?
put in paper space.
Mm.
What if you're X-repping them in? How does that work?
Okay, so the question here in the office is about annotation, specifically multi-leaders and paper space versus model space. And this is a topic that there actually can be quite a bit of heated debate on. And we'll get into it a little bit, and I'll provide my opinions, pros and cons, here in just a minute when it comes to annotation and the like. There are a number of other things that I'd like to discuss with Civil 3D specific objects before we get to annotation and stuff like that, if that's all right with you, Corey. Okay. Do we have any questions from anybody here on the phone? Signed in? Everybody's doing okay? Everybody's still with us? Y'all been awfully quiet this morning. I want to make sure everybody's still awake.
I told Kirsten to give $100 to the first one that asked the question.
Oh yeah? I'm surprised nobody's taking you up on that. Jacob, he wanted to take us up on that. He said all good. Good to hear, Jacob.